faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, I'll be interpreting Balzac's novel, The Wild Ass's Skin, for you. As kids, we all read the fisherman and goldfish fairy tale. A poor old fisherman catches a goldfish who begs to be released back to the sea. In return, it could grant all the fisherman's wishes. The fisherman's wife first demanded a grand mansion, then to become a noblewoman and queen. The goldfish fulfilled them all. Soon, the old woman demanded to rule the sea and have the goldfish serve her daily. The goldfish silently returned to the sea. When the fisherman got home, his wife was still in their shabby hut with the same broken wash basin. This tale teaches us that greedy desires make us lose what we already possess. Similar stories exist across Eastern and Western folklore, most famously Faust's tale. The devil satisfies Faust's desires, granting him power and knowledge, but in exchange, Faust sells his soul. Goethe based his great poetic drama, Faust, on this legend. Today's book, Balzac's The Wild Ass's Skin, is also about desire with similar fantastical elements. Published in 1831, it's Balzac's first philosophical novel and breakthrough masterpiece. It tells of a young man who obtains a wild ass's skin that grants wishes during his darkest hour, but his lifespan shortens with each wish. Did this magical skin truly satisfy him? How will he balance desire fulfillment against life reduction? Let's first explore the novel's main plot. The youth with the skin is Raphael, born noble but motherless at 10, raised under his father's strict discipline. He rose at 5 a.m. to study law, precisely reporting daily progress at dinner. He desperately wanted to break free from his father's control. He craved independence, wealth, even meeting a mistress. But his timid nature left these as fantasies while he suppressed his desires. Approaching 20, his father opened his heart to him. France's political turmoil had triggered reassessment of his father's hard-earned assets, now entangled in litigation. His father expected Raphael to use his legal knowledge to win the lawsuit, restore the legitimacy of the family property, and rebuild the family's once glorious reputation. To fulfill his father's long-cherished wish, Raphael didn't slack off for a moment, busily running between politicians' doors. But unfortunately, the lawsuit was lost, and because of this, he incurred a large debt. When the debts were paid off, his father also died of sorrow. Raphael lost his wealth, but with his strict academic training, he hoped to earn honor, wealth, and love through writing. He rented a room in the quietest part of Paris, planning to write a great philosophical work called The Treatise on Wisdom to make a name for himself and become a prominent figure. For 3 years, he reduced his material life to the minimum, spending only 18 coppers a day. Although he strongly desired wealth, love, and to stand out, he suppressed these desires and devoted himself wholeheartedly to writing. After 3 years, Raphael was still penniless. In his dire straits, he almost contemplated suicide. At this time, a friend, Rastignac, advised him to step out of his dull academic life, participate more in high society social activities, and learn to seek benefits for himself. Kita? Dawson quote. Rastignac introduced Raphael to a countess named Phaedra, who was in her 20s, had a substantial annual income, and was reputedly the most beautiful woman in Paris, always surrounded by noble young men. Raphael showed off his philosophy in front of Phaedra, and she responded effortlessly. Raphael was deeply attracted by Phaedra's charm, wealth, and intelligence, and he constantly tried to please her. But Phaedra didn't care. Phaedra would casually lose her temper with Raphael and even treated him as a plaything. One night, he walked Phaedra home. Because he had no money to tip the servant, Phaedra found it boring and told Raphael that she couldn't give him love. Heartbroken, Raphael wanted revenge against Phaedra. For that, he had to rise to prominence and make her regret it, but he had no way out and gradually became depressed. Rastignac advised him to enjoy life while he could, believing that indulgence is the most beautiful form of death. Raphael moved out of the hotel and spent all day mingling with Rastignac and his gang. He gambled, borrowed money recklessly, completely lost his rationality, and his life sank into a torrent of money and lies. And he lost his last silver coin, fell into hopeless despair, and decided to drown himself. Wandering along the Seine, he stumbled into an antique shop where the black-robed owner, learning of his suicidal intent, showed him a piece of wild ass's skin inscribed with Arabic text. It meant that whoever possessed this skin would have any wish granted. But with each wish, the skin would shrink and the owner's life would shorten. Accepting these terms, Raphael thought, rather than suicide, why not try fulfilling his final earthly wish for a perfect, extravagant feast? Oh. He rolled up the skin and left. On the street, journalist friends took him to a newspaper magnate's banquet. The banquet was extravagantly set with intellectuals debating loftily. After feasting, the host presented the finale. Beautiful young women flooded in, forming revelrous groups with guests. Drunk, Raphael confided his past to a friend. Alcohol made him remember the skin. Waving it, he shouted, "Death begun! Now I want to live! I want riches! I wish for 200,000 francs annual income. Bow before me."
Everyone laughed at his madness.
Yet next day, as revelry continued, a notary announced Raphael's inheritance of a huge fortune from his uncle, sparking amazed cheers.
Raphael hastily took out the skin. Its outline had visibly shrunk.
He realized this inheritance was the skin granting his wealth wish. Raphael moved into a mansion so vast it could host all nobility, his room buried deep behind many doors. He allowed only his butler at set times. By day he read, by night attended plays, speaking minimally. Any promise, intentional or not, would come true and shrink the skin. One night at the theater, through binoculars, he saw Fedora, still beautiful, still triumphant. Fedora's gaze met Raphael's, and her face instantly paled. He realized Raphael was staring at him with contempt, like a lightning bolt striking his heart. Previously, Raphael had mocked Fedora as a big shot in Parisian salons, and his words quickly spread through Paris, deeply wounding her. After the second act began, a young woman entered Raphael's box, and the audience gasped in admiration at her beauty. This resulted from Raphael's secret wish upon the wild ass's skin, to have the theater's most beautiful girl beside him to humiliate Fedora. But he had no interest in the woman himself and couldn't be bothered to look at her. Yet Raphael felt the brush of her dress, her soft breath, and the charm radiating from her. They turned almost simultaneously. One gasped,
Pauline! While the other cried, Mr. Raphael, what was happening?
This Pauline was the daughter of Madame Godard, his former landlady, who'd secretly loved Raphael. Her father, a squadron leader in Napoleon's army, had been captured and gone missing in war. Madame Godin firmly believed her husband was alive and ran the cheap inn while awaiting his return. Mother and daughter lived simply yet peacefully while waiting. Seeing Raphael poor but hard-working, they treated him with exceptional kindness. Pauline would often slip into his room while he wrote, leaving simple meals. In return, Raphael taught Pauline piano, painting, and grammar. Her beauty, innocence, and liveliness slowly won his affection, though Countess Fedora still held his heart. Who could have predicted their theater reunion? Why was Pauline there? Pauline's family had risen in status. Her father returned to Paris with great wealth. They moved to a new house, renting out their old inn. Pauline wanted to help Raphael financially, for she'd always loved him deeply. And then, yet, Raphael lacked not money now, but time. His life was dwindling.
He wished to dedicate his remaining life entirely to Pauline.
He said, "You shall be my wife, my guardian angel. At this very moment, your angelic smile has purified me. By your side, I am pure. I breathe the air of happiness." Raphael has only 2 months of life left. To seize the sudden happiness Pauline brought, he decided to ditch the wild ass's skin and tossed it down a well. And a few days later, the butler accidentally fished it back up. The skin was completely unharmed. Well, Raphael knew this magical talisman couldn't be discarded. With science so advanced, how could it not handle a piece of wild ass's skin? So he visited scientists everywhere, hoping to change the skin's size or just destroy it. Physicists used expansion machines and presses to stretch it. Terrifying roars echoed in the furnace. Water burst through iron tanks, spraying huge force, sweeping away houses, but the skin stayed fine. Workers chucked it into a smelting furnace, still useless. Raphael found chemists using a corrosion machine to ruin it, then electric currents to try and shatter it. The skin was unscathed. Raphael despaired and, filled with fear, hung it back in a frame, traced its outline with red ink, and watched his life shrink away. He fell asleep and woke to find Pauline beside him. Now, his only wish was to die in Pauline's arms. Raphael grew weaker, coughing worsened, his face pale, with death's shadow in his expression. Several doctors came for a consultation, but their diagnoses all differed. Afterwards, they unanimously recommended Raphael should recuperate in the mountains. There, he sat alone by the window daily, lost in thought for hours. Other guests hated his coldness and wanted him gone. Raphael moved to an even more remote mountain area. He was totally sick of society, and only nature made him feel free and calm. But everyone knew he wouldn't last long, and his old butler sent doctors and a priest to settle his affairs. He knew nature couldn't save him, so he just headed back to Paris. He asked doctors for opium meds, spending most of each day asleep. One day, after waking, the butler invited him to the hall, where a grand masked feast was being held for him. Lights dazzled, beauty swarmed, laughter and chatter filled the air. This was exactly one of Raphael's wishes from the day he got the wild ass's skin. A lavish feast like no other. Now the old butler had made it happen, but Raphael had zero interest. He silently returned to his bedroom, downed a big dose of sleeping pills, and went back to sleep. When he woke again, Pauline sat by him, and Raphael pulled out the wild ass's skin. It had become thin and tiny. Pauline learned the secret of the wild ass's skin, fled the room in fear, and bolted the door. Raphael shouted, "I want to die in your arms." Then, gathering his last bit of strength, he chased after Pauline and threw himself at her. When the butler heard the commotion and came in, Raphael was already dead in Pauline's arms. That's the plot summary of The Wild Ass's Skin. The novel has 3 parts, told in a flashback narrative. Part 1 tells how the protagonist wanted to commit suicide but later accidentally obtained the wild ass's skin. And part 2 is Raphael recounting the past to a friend, explaining why he wanted to kill himself. Part 3 returns to the present, describing the protagonist's outcome of gaining wealth but dying sorrowfully. It can be said that the wild ass's skin is the core symbol of the novel and the turning point in the protagonist's life and thoughts. After getting the wild ass's skin, Raphael went from worthless to living luxuriously, from wanting death to fearing it. Desires fulfilled, the skin shrank, life shortened. Raphael gained the enviable living conditions he dreamed of, but it led to an untimely death, showing that the wild ass's skin symbolizes the conflict between life and desire. And when Raphael received the wild ass's skin from the antique shop owner, the owner warned him that humans are drained of life by 2 instincts: desire and energy. He said, "Desire burns us, energy destroys us." What does that mean? Let's first talk about desire. People often say that desire represents unfulfilled dreams, from small things like wanting to own something to big aspirations like achieving life values. Desire inherently contains reasonable human pursuits, but if unreasonable or crossing boundaries, it can flip into a burden or even a disaster. For example, in the novel, love is also a form of desire, but when Raphael, unable to win Fedora's love, turned love into hatred, desire transformed from legitimate to evil. When he fulfilled his desire through the wild ass's skin, the skin shrank, his life decreased, and evil desires rapidly consumed his life, ending in death. So, how should we understand the concept of energy? If desire stems more from physical and sensory needs, representing material expansion, then energy refers to the vitality and willpower humans use to break through limitations, representing spiritual expansion. In the wild ass's skin, energy is mostly manifested in human rationality and scientific ideals. In the 19th century, scientific rationalism became the mainstream trend in Europe, not only in natural sciences, but also in philosophy and spiritual studies, filled with scientific ambitions. Humans try to completely grasp the secrets of nature and the human spirit through fixed concepts and analysis. But can humans truly exhaust the laws of nature and the human heart with reason? Balzac saw the arrogance of human energy run rampant in scientism and mercilessly mocked it in his novel. For example, Raphael sought help from famous experts in various fields to get rid of the wild ass's skin, but whether it was zoologists, physicists, or chemists, none could help. To cover up science's incompetence, the scientists agreed, "We must never tell the Academy of Sciences about this incident. Our colleagues would laugh at us." Another example, when Raphael's illness worsened, doctors were called for a consultation. Some said it was overuse of the brain, others said gastrointestinal disease, others said mental illness. In the end, they could only give the most evasive suggestion: send Raphael to the mountains for recuperation, using nature's random healing function instead of medical treatment. Similarly, Raphael, as a scholar, thought he could study Fedora's spiritual world as he wrote the treatise on will.
He once hid in Fedora's house to observe her. When he heard her exclaim, "Oh my God," he thought the shout was mysterious and might conceal the mystery of Fedora's soul.
But when Raphael asked Fedora why she shouted, "Oh my God," Fedora casually said, "I just forgot to tell the stockbroker to sell the bonds, so I exclaimed." This explanation dealt the final blow to Raphael. For a long time, he had tried to probe Fedora's profound inner world. He wanted to use philosophical methods to study the issues of human will and soul. He had hoped to melt her with poet-like passion, to inspire noble emotions in her, but in the end, he was met with ruthless mockery. All this declared the futility of Raphael's proud philosophical research. Whether it's the philosophical inquiry into the human spiritual world or the obsession with science, both belong to the category of human energy with extreme confidence, both arrogantly attempting to control everything from heaven to earth. On the title page of The Wild Ass's Skin, there is a dedication to the academician, Monsieur Savary. Savary was a real person and a friend of Balzac. In French, Savary is composed of the words for knowledge and scholar. And below this dedication, Balzac drew an irregular, winding serpentine line, creating a brilliant, ironic relationship between the scientists and this curve. In Balzac's view, so-called knowledge and scholars are nothing but a chaotic curve. Of course, Balzac didn't entirely reject science and knowledge, nor did he consider science absurd or mystical. He opposed the fanaticism and abuse of knowledge and science, the paranoia that leads to new superstitions, and the chaotic energy within science and reason, precisely the spiritual origin of the mad scientist in Western literature. In the 19th century, the protagonist of Mary Shelley's sci-fi novel, Frankenstein, was such a mad scientist. He wanted to create life like God, assembling a monster from human limbs. Actually, the antique shop owner in The Wild Ass's Skin is a character with the aura of a mad scientist. As Raphael was deep in thought in the antique shop, he suddenly heard a terrifying voice calling him. Then a bright light shone in, and a red fiery sphere enveloped an old man standing before him. This was the owner, ghost-like, with strangely youthful light in his eyes. Upon closer look, it was a shriveled, pale, little old man, dressed in a black velvet robe like a shroud, wearing a hat with white temples, cold and fierce eyes, both serene and terrifying. He explained the secret of the wild ass's skin to Raphael. warning of the terrifying nature of the desires and energy hidden within it. Then he also offered his own solution. He said that, compared to desire and energy, knowledge can place our fragile beings in a state of eternal tranquility. The owner himself traveled the world, following the power of knowledge and intellect without succumbing to instinctual impulses, claiming he had gathered all the world's passions and fervor into his highest function. What? Yeah. Achieving true freedom and enlightenment. But did the antique shop owner truly control desire with reason? Raphael didn't believe him. When he left with the wild ass's skin, he sarcastically told the owner, "To repay your kindness, I wish you'd fall in love with a dancer." As a result, after Raphael became wealthy, one day at the theater, he spotted a bizarre, incredible face in the crowd. Moving closer, he saw the antique shop owner, both decaying like a dying man and radiant with youth, frantically dancing with a dancer. Turns out, Raphael's offhand wish, "I wish you'd fall in love with a dancer," had become reality. Raphael asked him why he no longer adhered to the idea of overcoming desire with intellect. The shop owner said, "Now I've turned my life upside down, living as seen in this most mysterious antique shop in the book." This owner, who claimed to have infinite wisdom and be immune to external temptations, had his reason overturned by desire. He too was a victim of desire and energy. And, of course, when we say the wild ass's skin embodies the destructive force of desire and energy, it doesn't mean this is its only symbolism. It is a symbol with open meanings, rich in implications. For example, it also represents the journey of life and the passage of time. Raphael once told a friend that from a distance, his life seemed shortened by a strange spiritual phenomenon. The journey of life leaves little trace, and later recollections always simplify its richness. The word shortened, mentioned here, easily reminds us of how the wild ass's skin shrinks with each wish fulfilled. Thus, it's imbued with an unspeakable sorrow of life slipping away. It's said that in French, the word for wild ass's skin itself carries a meaning of sadness. For another example, Raphael once mentioned an analogy in conversation with a friend. People compare someone torn between two choices to a hungry and thirsty donkey, confused when faced with a bucket of water and a basket of hay placed equidistantly. Here, the donkey symbolizes the greed and pitiful state of someone in a dilemma. Balzac wove rich implications into the wild ass's skin, making it the thematic center of the entire book. It radiates multiple layers of meaning, and the narrative language of the novel is equally full of passion, that is, desire and energy. An eruption at the linguistic level, such as in the antique shop. The owner once said, "My feet have climbed the highest peaks in Asia and America. I've learned all human languages and lived under every social system." I lent money to a Chinese man, using only his father's body as collateral. I slept in an Arab's tent based solely on his verbal promise. I signed contracts in all European capitals. I stored my gold in a savage's hut without hesitation. In short, I gained everything because I knew how to despise everything. The language is full of parallel rhetoric, magnificent in momentum, driven forward by the underlying desire and energy. Although the book uses a third-person narrative perspective, most chapters are in the form of dialogue. Narrating from a character's perspective has the advantage of fully unleashing the character's inner desire for expression, revealing extremely vivid subjectivity. The uniqueness of the wild ass's skin reveals Balzac's own complexity. Written in 1830, when French literary circles embraced mysticism, especially Swedish mystic philosopher Swedenborg's ideas, and German fantasy writer Hoffmann's works, Balzac was an avid follower. It's said he dedicated an entire bookshelf to Swedenborg's writings. Swedenborg believed that beyond the physical world exists a transcendental realm, where the material world serves as surface phenomena, and
secretly reflecting the face of this transcendental world.
Hoffman specialized in medieval horror tales, often called a dark romanticist. While Balzac is considered a realist master, his mystical side is overlooked. Both mysticism and romanticism were his weapons against 19th century scientific optimism, the wild ass's skin being his prime example. French poet Baudelaire greatly admired it, praising Balzac as a passionate visionary. Goethe, upon reading it, acclaimed it as a new type of novel that captures life's twin tragedies, unfulfilled desires and fulfilled desires. Balzac wrote The Wild Ass's Skin during post-revolution turmoil after France's July Revolution of 1830. The novel scene where Raphael attends a newspaper magnate's banquet, 20 people clamoring with opinions, mirrors French society's actual state. Repeated revolutions bred weariness. The emerging bourgeoisie, drowned in industrial speculation, with society obsessed by wealth accumulation. This backdrop fueled Balzac's exploration of desire and energy, and meta stopped by. Moreover, Balzac himself was perpetually indebted and extravagantly wasteful. While dodging creditors, he wrote prolifically to repay debts, undoubtedly gaining deep insight into desire's frenzied power. Balzac titled his collected works The Human Comedy, dividing it into three sections: studies of manners, and analytical studies. The Wild Ass's Skin belongs to philosophical studies, works with fantastical elements that address profound questions shaping his later studies of manners. For instance, the theme of intense conflict between desire and life in The Wild Ass's Skin transforms into an outstanding portrayal of money's spiritual function in later major works. And then we're already familiar with these works, like Old Goria, Eugène Grandet, Lost Illusions, Cousin Pons, Cousin Bet, Splendors and Miseries of Courtesans, and so on. Or, in these works, money replaces desire and energy, becoming the currency for mutual transformation of all things, and the medium for overturning fate and morality. Thus, the philosophical studies are the central hall of the entire human comedy, and The Wild Ass's Skin can be considered the core door in that hall. Reading The Wild Ass's Skin today is significant not only for examining Balzac's multifaceted nature, but more importantly for its enlightenment on our sense of value. We often try to seize more resources and fulfill more desires, thinking that's the embodiment of life's value and the meaning of our existence. But we frequently ignore that while amplifying one part of ourselves. Another part, perhaps more important, is quietly shrinking and vanishing. We're not masters of our desires and energy. We can't end one desire with bigger, more desires. The life paradox we must face is the fiercer the fire of desire, the closer it is to self-extinguishment. Insatiable desire and energy bring nothing but a dream to people. The Wild Ass's Skin in Balzac's writing serves as a warning. As commented by the 19th century French philosopher Damer, it is a bizarre and fantastical illusion, a dream forged by money, science, artistic glory, and power, a vast and thrilling nightmare. All right, that concludes our introduction to Balzac's The Wild Ass's Skin. I heard the notes are below the audio. See you next time.